Can you believe that little munchkin is 6 months old already? Yes, Annie just turned 6 months old, which means we are entering the world of solid foods, which means that I need to get my butt in gear and I need to start prepping some baby food. The goal this week is to prepare enough baby food for the next 3 months or so. In these first 3 months, she's really just starting to get the taste of food, starting to get the feel for it. She's not really eating a whole lot. It's more about experiment than it is about actually consuming a lot of food. The hope is that I'm going to have a lot of baby food on hand, ready to go in the freezer so that I don't have to buy much, if anything, from the store. I want to try and have her eat as much scratch-made food as I possibly can. It's going to be better for her, and then it's also going to be better for our wallet. Of course, there's absolutely no shame in buying baby food from the store, baby snacks like that. There's nothing wrong with that, but if I can, I'm going to try to make as much as I can at home. So that is what we are doing this week. Now, when it comes to baby food and feeding babies, getting them started on solids, there's a lot of different approaches. Honestly, it's been a long time since I've even researched it. I don't know what is recommended now or what people are doing. This is my 4th baby, and so I am going to do the same thing I did with the rest of my babies because I know that it works for us and it's the easiest thing for me to do. So we do a little bit of purees, a little bit of baby-led weaning. We kind of do a mix of both. Especially this next month or two, it'll be mostly purees and very simple food. Nothing too complicated, not a lot of ingredients, very basic. I like to slowly introduce my babies one food at a time. That way I can monitor them and their reactions and how they feel about that certain type of food, whether they like it or not. I like to take things very slow at first, and then as they start eating more, getting more variety of foods in their diet, then I slowly start introducing more baby-led weaning, more foods like off of our plate, and slowly she'll transition into eating exactly what we're eating. It's a very simple approach to baby food, and I think it's going to be good. Keeping all of that in mind, I went ahead and made a list of foods that I want to make. Some of these are new to me, some of these I've made with all of my babies. I am keeping in mind that she's going to need some form of protein. I'm also trying to keep in mind that she's going to need lots of fiber because as they start eating solid foods, their bodies aren't used to that and they're going to need that extra fiber to get their bodies doing what they need to do. So I've got a list, I've got some purees, I've got some more solid foods for baby-led weaning. Normally I'm someone who likes to make a lot of one kind of food and then we'll just have it on hand and we'll keep reaching for it. But because I don't know her taste buds, what she's gonna like, I don't want to make too much of one thing in the case that she ends up really not liking it and then it just goes to waste. So instead today we're going to make a lot of different foods in smaller quantities, which is going to be more work for me, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. What do you think, Annabeth? You excited? Like I said, I'm not an expert. I don't know what is recommended these days for baby food. I feel like rules with babies change all the time and it's hard to keep up. But as an experienced mom, this is what I feel comfortable doing. I'm gonna put my hair up, I'm gonna get an apron on, and we're gonna get started. All right, let's start with purees. This is very quick and very simple to do. I think it's a lot less complicated than people imagine it to be. In fact, in my opinion, I think it's a lot less effort to actually make this at home than it is to go to the grocery store and buy it off the shelves. So I love making baby food at home for that reason. Oh, quick little tip. I always freeze my veggie skins and ends, and then when this bag gets full, I just pop it into my pressure cooker with some water, and just like that, I've got veggie broth for soups or whatever else I'm making that week. So there's a couple different ways that you can go about making purees. There's, using fresh fruits and veggies or using frozen. I had a bunch of carrots in the fridge, so I went ahead and peeled those, chopped them up, and got them into a pot. I just added a tiny bit of water and turned the heat on with the lid and let that steam. Every once in a while I checked it to make sure that they weren't burning and that there was still water in the bottom, and if I needed to, I'd add a little bit more water. Then once they got soft, I took my immersion blender and blended it all up. You can also put this in like a blender or a food processor or whatever you have on hand. I find it's really easy just to use my immersion blender. If I need to, I'll add a little bit more water until this is a nice smooth puree, and that is it. It's really quite simple. It's even more simple if you use frozen foods though, because you don't have to do any washing or cutting or peeling. You just open the bag, pour the goods in the pot, add a little water, and do the same thing. Now, as for molds, I use these red silicone molds for my 3 previous babies, and it worked great. But I personally find that silicone makes my food taste gross, and I figured if I don't like the taste of food in silicone, my babies probably don't like that taste either. So this time I did opt for just regular muffin tins. I'm sure you could also go to the dollar store and buy like ice cube trays. You don't have to buy anything special or fancy for this, just use what you have. I did spray a little bit of avocado oil on the tin before I put the food in. Whether or not that's necessary, I don't know, but I did it anyway. Back in fall, we had picked pumpkins and we had gotten a whole bunch of apples, and so I had turned it into pumpkin puree and applesauce. So I just pulled those out of the freezer and let them thaw. And then this was really easy because I had already done the work ahead of time. I just snipped off the corner of the Ziploc bags and used the bags as a piping bag just to fill the molds and pop them back into the freezer. Once they were frozen, I found it was really easy just to pull the muffin tin out of the freezer and let it sit on the counter for like 10 minutes or so. And then they popped really easily out of the tins and it wasn't an issue at all. To store them, I labeled some Ziploc bags and popped them in there, got them in the freezer, really easy. You can have fun and be creative with this. I wanted to have a variety of fruits and vegetables, so I did things like carrots and peas and green beans. Normal potato. Giant sweet potato. I did applesauce and pears, sweet potato. I even did like regular russet potato and made like mashed potatoes. I wanted to get a good variety of things and things that would mix well with one another so that as she starts eating more foods, I can start giving her combinations and then she can explore different tastes and textures that way. For the russet potato, I did actually end up adding a tiny bit of salt and a tiny bit of butter just because it's really quite flavorless otherwise. But everything else, I just left it as the fruit or the veggie and water, nothing more. Moving on to baby-led weaning recipes. So this time I did quite a few different ones. I tried to get a good variety. I did some that are familiar to me and then also some that are new to me. This is one of my favorites. These are frozen yogurt bites, and I thought this would be a really good transition from purees into baby-led weaning because it is very soft and mushy and tasty. I actually make homemade yogurt every single week, and I do have a recipe for that on my blog. Normally when I make it, I add maple syrup to it, but because babies can't really have maple, I don't think they're supposed to have maple syrup. They're definitely not supposed to have honey until they're 1 year old. So before I added anything to my yogurt, I scooped them out and put it into bowls. To add a little bit of sweetness and flavor to the yogurt, I added some homemade strawberry jam and some homemade Saskatoon berry syrup. I didn't want to add too much because there is sugar in it. I used organic cane sugar to make the strawberry jam as well as the Saskatoon berry syrup, but I wanted to add enough that it would taste good. Once the yogurt mixtures were made, I got it into one of these little bottles that I got off Amazon to pipe it onto a baking sheet. You can use a piping bag, you can use like a Ziploc bag with a corner cut off. Either of these things work. I find that this bottle just gives me a little bit more control and I really enjoy using it for things like icing or things like this. So I just piped little dots onto some parchment paper and got that in the freezer. And that was that. Very easy. Of course, you can also just make this yogurt mixture and serve it to them just as yogurt, but this is a fun little way for them to try eating it on their own. It's also really good for when they're teething because that cold feeling is nice on their gums. Now this recipe is new to me. It is from my baby-led weaning book that I've had since Eloise was a baby. I can link that below. But these are oatmeal fingers. I thought it might be kind of interesting just to try some different recipes and flavors and textures. So it starts off just with some cooked oatmeal. Once that was cooled down, I added it to a bowl with some other ingredients. So there were chia seeds, ground flax seeds, a little bit of cinnamon, and some peanut butter. I mixed this all together and then I tasted it and I thought, you know what, this doesn't actually taste very good. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of sugar to make it taste good, because my thing is, if I don't enjoy eating it, my baby probably won't like it either. So when I needed to, I tweaked the recipes just a little bit to make them taste good. Now this was pretty sticky, but I let it just sit on the counter for a little while so that the chia seeds had a chance to like absorb some of the moisture, and then it became more firm and easy to work with. So I scooped out portions onto a parchment lined baking sheet with a small cookie scoop, and I was gonna form them into balls. That's what the recipe says to do, but then I thought it might be kind of fun to make little finger shapes. It might be easier for her to grasp onto it and eat it. And this is a no bake recipe. So from there, I just popped it into the freezer and let it freeze until I could put it into a Ziploc bag. This recipe is new to me. These are broccoli tots, and I can leave the recipe link down below. In fact, I will leave a link to my Pinterest board as well, where I have pinned a number of recipes that I used, and then also some that I am interested in also trying still. So I started by chopping up some broccoli and steaming it a little bit. It's pretty much the same process as making a puree, except I didn't puree it. Once they were steamed, I let them just kind of dry out and cool down before moving on to the next step. And then also Annabeth wanted some snuggles at this point, so I put her in the carrier. This is my favorite carrier, by the way. This is very off topic, but this is the Secura Bloom carrier, and I love it because it's very supportive, and I can do a front carry and back carry with this thing. Anyway, back to the broccoli tots. Once the broccoli was cooled down and dried out a little bit, I started chopping it, and I wanted to chop it really, really fine. Think the size of your baby's pinky nail. That's the size that you want these to be, because that's about as big as their airways are. So you want to be careful that everything is chopped up to about that size, or can be chewed down to about that size. Then I added some shredded cheese, some egg, some almond flour, and some salt, and then some seasoning. So I did parsley, garlic powder, and onion powder, and mixed this all up. My one mistake was not shredding my cheese smaller. My cheese grater has like a really small setting and then a really big setting, and I should have done the smaller setting because the cheese just kind of melted and misshaped these in the oven, but that doesn't affect the way that they taste or function. So then I scooped these out again on a cookie sheet lined with parchment paper. I formed them into balls, and then I kind of formed them into a tot shape, so kind of a cross between a meatball and an oatmeal finger, and then I just popped them into the oven. And then I decided, because she needs a little bit of protein, I was gonna make some meatballs. Now, I don't have a recipe for this. Whenever I make meatballs, I just kind of throw stuff into the bowl. So we've got some ground beef, we've got an egg, and some sourdough breadcrumbs I had in the freezer. And then I added some seasonings. I think I did the similar seasonings to the broccoli tots, the garlic powder and onion powder for sure, and some salt. The rest is pretty straightforward. I used a small cookie scoop again, parchment lined baking sheet, formed these into balls, and into the oven they went. Moving on, I'm making some mini quiches, or mini egg bites, if you will. Again, this is a really great way to get protein into your baby's diet, and it has very similar ingredients to other things that we've already made. So I just added some more chopped broccoli and some cheese, some salt, pepper, milk. I divided the mixture into mini muffin tins and baked these until they were firm. Now this is a recipe I've made with all my babies. This is from my baby-led weaning book, and it's called Fruit Lax Spread. This has a variety of different dried fruits that is going to help bring a lot of fiber into your baby's diet. There's raisins, there's prunes, there's dates. You want to get these soaking overnight so that they're nice and soft. Then the next day, all you need to do is pour this entire mixture into your blender. Add a little bit of prune juice. You can even just add like extra water if you wanted. Then a little bit of oat bran or wheat bran and blend this all together. You're looking for like a jam type consistency. That's how I use this, is like a jam. This is naturally quite sweet and very easy to add to, say, toast, or to spread on pancakes, or to put into yogurt. Just to mix into whatever your baby's eating to give them a little bit of extra fiber. Now, because this does make quite a lot, I decided to freeze these the same way that I did the purees. And then whatever was left over, I'm keeping in the fridge so that I can use it as I need it. We're gonna move on to some baby pancakes. I was gonna make banana pancakes. I think that's a pretty common baby-led weaning recipe, but then I thought I've got a lot of pumpkin puree, and I found a pumpkin baby pancake recipe. So I was curious, I wanted to try it out. All the recipe called for was some pumpkin puree, some flour, some milk. I also added a little bit of sugar, and then I tried cooking these, and they came out very not fluffy. Kind of a weird texture. I didn't like it very much. So I went ahead and made a second batch, and I added a teaspoon of baking powder to the mix, and this made a world of a difference. They actually came out fluffy like pancakes, and they were much, much better. Here you can kind of see how fluffy the one on the bottom is versus the one on the top. Like the one on the top is really just quite, it wasn't fluffy at all. It had kind of a, I don't know, an odd texture. Next, we are making peanut butter oatmeal bars. Now this is similar ingredients to the oatmeal fingers, except this time we are baking it. This recipe starts off with wet ingredients in the bowl first. So you're gonna need some mashed bananas, some peanut butter. I should have mixed it at this point before adding the milk. Then you'll need 1 egg, mix this all together and start adding the dry ingredients. So you're gonna need some oats, cinnamon, and ground flaxseed. I love how simple baby-led weaning recipes are because they don't require a lot of ingredients. The point is that there's as few ingredients as possible. And it's usually just a very quick, put everything in a bowl and bake it or freeze it. Very simple. So I just poured this into a loaf pan lined with parchment paper, and when it was baked, I cut it into little tiny squares. I can't say this was my most favorite recipe, personally, but we will see what Annabeth thinks. The last recipe was probably my favorite. These are called ABC muffins, which stands for apple, banana, carrot muffins. Starting off, you're going to need some applesauce, some mashed banana, and some mashed carrot. Now, because I had already made carrot puree, I just reached for that instead of steaming and mashing a carrot. To this, you're going to add a couple of eggs, some melted coconut oil, some baking powder, and some flour. When you mix this all together, it's going to be like this orangey muffin batter type consistency. I just baked these in my mini muffin tins once again and popped those into the oven. And they came out as these really cute little yellow muffins. And there was no added sugar to this, but they actually taste kind of sweet. Like they're actually yummy. These turned out really well. I was really happy with these. Now for freezing and storing these goodies, it's pretty much all the same thing. I just labeled and dated Ziploc bags. It might also be helpful to write out the ingredients of each item. That way you know exactly what is inside each thing. Added everything into those labeled Ziploc bags and put it into the freezer. Now to serve these, I just take them out of the freezer. I've got these really lovely little jars that I found on Amazon that are the perfect size. I'll take a few frozen bricks of food and just pop them into the jars, put them into the fridge, and I've got her food ready for the entire week. I can mix and match different flavors and textures and varieties, and in just a few seconds, I've got food ready for her for the entire week. I love having a freezer stock of food for this reason. So those are all the recipes that I've made for her so far. Now I've got a freezer full of a variety of different foods with different textures and tastes and colors. And all the ingredients I used were very simple, very straightforward, and everything made from whole foods. That was kind of my goal, is I wanted everything to be whole foods for her. Again, I will have links below, links for kitchen tools I used, links for recipes I enjoy. I hope this video was really helpful and informative and made you feel confident to do the same thing for your babies. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.